Firebase Studio was released recently, and as you might expect, every influencer this side of the Rio Grande is calling it the Replit killer. But is it? Well, in this video, we are going to cut straight to the point. We're going to look at Firebase Studio. We're going to talk about it for a second. I'm going to show you a quick little UI I made in about 10 minutes. And we're going to talk about the top 4 things that honestly make it pretty cool. And like anything in life, we're going to talk about the few things that make me want to bash my head into a wall repeatedly. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. This video is going to be a slightly above beginner level guide to Firebase Studio and who it's really for. And if you are new to the channel, howdy. My name is Sean. I own a few businesses and this channel is dedicated to showing you how I actually use AI in them. Either way, this video will be good for you if you fall into any one of the 3 categories. You actively vibe code and you haven't actually heard about Firebase Studio yet. You actively vibe code and you have heard of this, but you just want a breakdown that actually makes sense and isn't a waste of time. Number 3, you are interested in the idea of being able to build an app. Maybe you've heard about vibe coding before, then you heard about this Firebase thing and you just like watching videos about this type of stuff to see if it's something you might be able to do. So all that said, let's just get right into it. In this video, I'm going to cover off on a few core concepts. Number 1, where Firebase Studio actually fits into this broader ecosystem compared with tools like Replit, Lovable, and B0. My top 3 features that actually make the tool pretty cool. Who this is actually a good fit for and who it is not a good fit for. And lastly, what are the things that Firebase needs to figure out so that I can stop bashing my head against the wall? So first thing here is an example of the app. Like I said, I was able to make this in a few minutes. Pretty cool. We can upload a photo. We can add a description of a recipe. We can give some tasting notes for that recipe. And then when we hit generate, it's going to go off for a few seconds. And then when it's done, we are going to have popped out the other side a Michelin star recipe. So how does this compare to a workflow or an output that we would have in a tool like Replit or V0 or Lovable? To be honest, they all fit into pretty much the same type of bucket. They can help you go from rough idea to functioning prototype pretty quickly. So in any of those tools, I probably would have been able to create a very similar output to this one. But here is the difference. With Firebase Studio, there's a stronger emphasis on giving you, the user, control over the development process, the inputs, and the code. Meaning it's actually encouraged in the UI to get in there and actually code things. And so the best way that I could think to position this would be if you're afraid of running apps locally and having to configure development environments and it really makes you pull your hair out, but you're trying to take that step toward being able to actually code things, but you don't want to lose so much time in the DevOps side of things, but you still want to be able to use some Replit-y kind of features where you're chatting out how you want the app to be and it pops out the other side, right? You want a mixture of those 2 worlds. Firebase Studio is a good place to start. So it's kind of carving out for itself this nice little space between Cursor and Replit. It's kind of playing in that middle area. And it does this in an opinionated way, meaning they funnel you into what they believe to be their best practices and best ways of doing things, which you could view that as a benefit or you could view that as a negative depending on your goals. So if you're a beginner, but you want to start touching the code a little bit more in an approachable way, this would be a good place to start. And to top it all off, it is actually free. Right now, at least, it is free. You do not have to pay anything. Just have a Google account and you can go sign up for this thing and start using it. That being said, stay around till the end because some of the pieces of this tool are a fucking nightmare that you will want to avoid. But let's say you are a beginner. Let me show you my first tool that I think would be really helpful for you, which is their starter templates. So when you first log in, you have this option to start coding an app, okay, down here. Now you can import your own local repo, which is nice touch, pretty cool. But on this right-hand side here, as we begin to scroll, we have a bunch of frameworks that we can pick from. So if you wanted a Next.js app, Node backend using Express, if you wanted a MongoDB instance spun up, if you wanted a React Native plus Expo app, like you were going to develop an Android or iOS app using React and you wanted to do that, you can come through here and you can just select one of these, give it a name, hit create, and it is just going to go and spin this thing up for you. Now, the thing that's cool is this is going to work like out of the box. It's not going to be a case where you download the thing and try to launch it and you have version mismatching and all this stuff. It is going to work for you. And that's what they're kind of doing here in the background. They're setting up the workspace. They're initializing the environment. They're going to build it. It's going to be working for you. And so this could be really cool for you, for example, if you want to try like prototyping out some cool apps. You're like, hey, yeah, dude, it'd be so nice to be able to make like an iOS and an Android app at the same time. I want to go prototype that thing. But it's like daunting to think about having to like emulate a device on your computer. You don't want to dick around with that stuff. You just want to get in and you want to develop something. This is pretty cool. Now, for a lot of you, what you like about a tool like Replit, for example, is that you're really vibing, right? Or to put it in the words of one of OpenAI's founding team members, the hottest new programming language is English, meaning you want to be able to just talk out your features. And so that is where this prototyping feature comes into play. Now, this is the feature that I used to build that app that I showed you in the very beginning. I did this with the prototyping feature. And so it works just like a Replit or a Lovable or a V0. You give it a prompt describing what you want, and it goes out and it builds the thing, right? Complete with full stack capabilities. The front end, the back end, the database design, the setup of the database, all of that type of stuff done for you. Okay, so let's say we came through here. It said an app that generates a poem based on a series of photos. And we say prototype with AI. So this is going to pop you into the prototyping feature within Firebase Studio, and it's going to start building this thing out for you. What I did notice here with Firebase Studio, full disclosure, is that the UI sucks ass big time. And so the UI, for example, that we see over here, I actually used my Vibe design system, which I will link somewhere here, to actually build this thing out, because the first iteration that I have had from this was so bad that I had to go back and give some sort of prompt. And then it did give me like a pretty cool series of like splash pages and other functionality. And so I'll link that somewhere around this video. Again, I highly recommend, whether you're using that video or a different video from someone else showing you how to Vibe design things, highly recommend that you pump that output into here, so that you get something that actually looks good. And so what we have here now inside of the prototyping piece is that they're going to show us what the features are they're building. You can chat back and forth if you want this to make certain changes. It's going to give you their style guidelines. And then we come through and we say prototype this app, and it is going to go from there, and it's going to actually build this thing out. Like most other tools, we can see what's happening in real time, the files that are being changed, what's happening up here, and so on. Now, one bonus that I thought was really cool, since it is a Google app, it will automatically configure for you and automatically generate API keys for Gemini. So if you're doing any sort of like generative stuff, it'll just create that key for you and then integrate it into your app automatically. So pretty cool. So again, this prototype feature is really great because it allows us to build stuff pretty quickly. But again, like I said, UI, not that great. And now at any time, we can just choose to go back and look at the actual code. So if we click this edit code button, this will pop us over into an editor environment. And so once we're in here, we can start looking at different files, right? Poking around, going into the page, making changes that we might want to make in here. We can come through and we can chat with Gemini. We could say something like, add Firebase authentication into the app, right? We could send that message through. We can actually start chatting with this thing and building out from there. So again, it's this really nice carve out of like really hands-off type of stuff like you would have in a Replit or a Lovable, and then more hands-on type of stuff, which is what you would do with like a Cursor or a Windsurf. It's like it's somewhere in between those two places. But let's like zoom back out for 1 second to look at that 1,000-foot eagle eye view of where we are right now. We've got this Firebase Studio tool where we can go in, we can actually edit things in detail in a code editor, or we can use this prototyping app where we're kind of talking with things back and forth like we would inside of Replit. That's where we are on like a 1,000-foot view, right? We can do kind of both of these things. But remember, the benefit of this thing is that we're meant to be able to deploy full stack applications a lot more easily, meaning a full front end with all of the functionality, a full back end with all of the APIs and things that we need, databases, authentication, the deployment, like everything being done much more easily. That's what this is meant to help us do. And it helps make that happen with this third feature, which is the Studio. So inside of our Firebase Studio, there's this option over here that we can click on, and it opens up the Studio. Now, inside of the Studio, you're gonna see down here that we have access to different Google infrastructure automatically. And I am sure they are going to build this out further and further over time. Meaning if we wanted to deploy this as like a full stack web app, for example, we could deploy it to Cloud Run in a click. Or if we wanted to have more generative AI features in our app, one click, authenticate, grant the access, and it is automatically integrated and connected to our tool. Or maybe we want to use some sort of geolocation feature, right? And we can just automatically use the Google Maps APIs and infrastructure directly in our app. And again, we can do all of this with the click of a button. And so if you're trying to build in a tool like Replit, for example, or V0, and you're trying to use things that would need to piggyback on the infrastructure of a tool like Google, it might actually be better for you to build the thing out in the first place inside of Firebase Studio, because those things are going to be much more tightly connected. So let's just imagine for a second, maybe you're building a professional chef training dojo where it teaches you technique and it gives you recipes, and then you wanted to critique what your recipe actually ended up looking like. Well, you could just one click integrate Gemini and be off to the races with vector embeddings, with generative AI, and not need to worry about all of that configuration. Or imagine this is an iOS app and we need a backend infrastructure for it. With just a few clicks, you can host your entire backend API and database within Google's infrastructure. And so in my opinion, the battle for dominance in this vibe coding space, it's really gonna start coming back to developer enablement. Meaning, how can we get people going from idea to deployed and scalable application as quickly as possible and as easily as possible? And this tool, Firebase Studio, is obviously a step in that direction. The only downside to that is that you get locked into Google's ecosystem. And so you can view that almost like a golden handcuff. Some people might like that, some people might hate that. And so I can give you a concrete example of that. If we were to go into our React Native project from earlier, one of the things that you're gonna notice is that they kind of scrub out the existence of iOS in this. So even like the emulator that they have in here for Expo Go is not including iOS, right? It's only even giving you Android as an option. And you start to notice this more and more as you're starting to mess around with different features, that they're opinionated in the way they do things, and they're also locking you into their ecosystem in many ways. Now, that doesn't mean that if you weren't to like eject this from Firebase and go run it on your computer, that you wouldn't have access to iOS, but it does indicate that they're not exactly trying to create a completely open source system for themselves. Obviously, they're a company, they're trying to make money with this stuff. And so another example of that, if we were to go down here and we wanted to actually chat with our AI, we can only use Gemini models, right? We cannot use Claude or any of these other tools. So again, if you're comparing this to like Cursor, you're a lot more limited in the model that you're able to use to solve these problems. So again, golden handcuffs. So all that said, who is Firebase Studio actually for? To get the most out of this tool, you are going to want to have some sort of experience actually writing code or working with code or debugging code, writing scripts at the very least, or else you're going to have a bad time. If you are somebody that has never written a line of code and you try to get in here and deal with some of the small little idiosyncrasies of this tool, it's not going to be great. For all its awesomeness and some really cool things that you can do, there are also a lot of things that are super big headaches. And so at the risk of sounding too negative, let's talk about those. So there's a few things inside of Firebase that honestly are driving me a little crazy, especially when you compare them to tools like Cursor or Windsurf, and I'm gonna break those down. So number one, being locked into these Gemini models really does suck, for the simple reason that it honestly isn't super good at solving a lot of these coding problems. You know, I've been sitting here trying to have like very simple configuration problems solved, and it's like just stuck in this loop of like not solving the problem and creating the same error for itself over and over and over and over again. And I think part of that is because of the model that it is forcing me to use. I don't have these problems when I use a tool like Claude. Now that's something that probably could be solved over time as they start introducing more advanced models into the system, but for now, it is what it is. Number 2, the inline editor, so meaning the ability to like highlight a piece of code or a chunk of code and have the AI do something to it, is one of the most unintuitive things I've ever experienced. You've got this core functionality that is hidden deep down in multiple layers of menu items, right? Just to get to the point where I can like inline edit or explain a piece of code. Now, if you've used tools like Cursor or Windsurf, this just isn't it, right? This is like kind of like unacceptable in many ways from the perspective of somebody that is trying to like really use this more as like a, again, like a vibe coding type of tool. You want to surface those things so that they're very accessible to people, not hide them multiple layers down in like some random right-click submenu thing. Number 3, if you see my other videos, one of the things that I care most about with these tools, and you guys know this if you've seen my other videos, is that to have like a really professional app that people want to buy, it's got to look good. It's got to feel good, right? It's got to feel like someone put their soul into the thing. And all of these tools, for what it's worth, Replit, V0 for sure, even Lovable, they kind of give you really shitty UIs. And Firebase Studio is even worse than those tools, in my opinion, in giving you a UI, right? It's like they took the idea for what the features technically need to do, and then they put some like kind of crappy layout and color scheme together and say like, there's your app. That's not really going to cut it if you're trying to build something that's actually like fucking cool that people want to use. This isn't going to do it for you. You have to use some other sort of system to design your shit. Shameless plug right now for my video that teaches you how to design really cool stuff. So number 4, thing that's really frustrating for me is their app emulator. I get it. We're trying to do probably some very technical things under the hood to get this thing to render in a browser like this, but it really does not work well. So I have defaulted in this tool to just building apps in React, like pure vanilla React, and then just thinking through like how would I port this over to React Native on my actual computer, because their emulators and their loaders really bad. They break half the time. They take forever to load. This just like would not be a practical, seamless development environment for anyone. And number 5, and probably the thing that stuck out to me the most in the beginning, is that it does a terrible job at surfacing errors to the user. Meaning, there will be a lot of the time when you're running into an error and it shows you maybe like a UI indicator that there's an error that like pops up inside of the emulator, but there's no way in the output or the debug console or anything to actually get that error message. And so you have like these truncated messages that you can't even do anything with. And then I can't pass that into the system for context to help it solve the problem. And so to be honest, for me, that was like a little bit of a nail in the coffin type of situation, given how many errors get generated from the tool. Kind of a pain in the ass that like I can't just like very easily pass an error message through as context and have it just solve that problem for me. So they need to do a better job at surfacing errors through for the user. And so the result of all 5 of those things, when you like take them together and you're thinking through like, man, what would it be like to actually build with this thing? It really just doesn't flow. There's a lot of like these immersion breaking moments with Firebase Studio. Don't get me wrong, it is a preview version of the tool. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just trying to get out in front of the hype train of videos that are coming out on it. But I did have really high hopes for it, and I get it. It's a preview version. It doesn't really work the way that I would hope that it should, and I am sure they are going to improve this thing over time. But as it stands today, for someone that's like a beginner or even intermediate AI powered IDE coder / vibe coder, it's got a lot of holes that need to be plugged. So there's a lot of people out there claiming this thing is cooked, or this thing's cooked, or that thing's cooked, and Firebase is the coolest thing in the world. More like half-baked, if you ask me. So for me, I'm sticking to my current vibe stack. I'm not changing anything that I do because of this tool. I might dick around with it for some like rapid prototyping and stuff like that, because it is like a nice little interface. It is also free, which is something you need to consider against these other tools. And if you want to see my current full stack in action, I'm gonna have videos coming out later in the month where I take a app from idea fully through to like, hey, this thing looks awesome and it works. And so I'm actually really excited to record those, so stay tuned for them. And also, if you want any of those vibe design templates that I keep talking about, they are free inside of my school group, which you can find a link for down below. So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one.